Hi, I'm Sarah Chin, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes family can be your worst enemy, especially in business. I still feel the bitter taste of these words on my tongue. They burn like alcohol on a fresh wound. 10 years. For exactly 10 years, I invested everything into our company. Soul, heart, youth, every thought and every breath. I turned a miserable computer repair shop into Chen Technologies, a $50 million business. I thought we were building an empire. It turned out that I was only preparing the throne for the queen, who had always considered it hers by birthright. Sometimes success breeds envy. It's a cliche until you see it in your own sister's eyes. In those eyes that once laughed with me on the same bed. I still remember how it all began. Our business was huddled in a closet in a shopping center that smelled of dust and soldering acid. Dad founded it 20 years ago. This was his fortress, his meaning, although the fortress barely brought in bread. And I was his quiet shadow. While the brilliant Emma, Dad's favorite, conquered elite business schools, I stayed. She sat at the counter, disassembled dead hard drives, and at night, gritting her teeth, studying computer science textbooks from the local college. "Sarah, you're burying your talent here," Emma said condescendingly, visiting for the holidays in a sparkly dress and with a new fashionable slang. "You should strive for more." But I saw potential where they saw poor service. While she was analyzing cases about giants, I was writing code. In my senior year, during the long nights, I created our first software, a simple accounting tool. Not a masterpiece, but a working one, as comfortable as an old shoe. Dad snorted, "Toys." But when the first shopkeepers began to pay for licenses, for the first time he looked at me not as an assistant, but as maybe an ally. "Looks like you're up to something, baby," he said, his voice laced with grudging, precious approval. These words warmed me for years. If only I had known that they would evaporate like the steam from my morning coffee. I was burning. 14 hours a day, no days off, no life. I built, expanded, breathed every line of code, every client call. Meanwhile, Emma was climbing the career ladder in New York, in the world of glossy presentations. Mom was quietly worried as she brought me containers of food to the office. "Don't burn, daughter. Life has other colors." But my paint was the blue light of the monitor, which reflected the future. When we reached the first million, Emma suddenly remembered her family. She's back, solemn, like a queen in exile. At dinner, which my mother cooked and I almost didn't eat, tired, she announced, "I think it's time to take my rightful place in the company. With my experience, we will reach a new level." Dad beamed like a child. "We need your professional approach, princess." My fork froze in midair. Legal place. I looked around. These walls, every server, every satisfied client, everything was built with my hands, while she was building her resume. And now it was all just being passed on to her? Without questions, without gratitude, like family silver. I was appointed co-CEO. Funny. I remained the brain and hands, and Emma became the face. She gave interviews, received awards for women in IT, smiled at the camera, talking about our innovations. Its fame grew along with our turnover, and I, as a guardian spirit whom no one sees, ensured this growth itself. She methodically cut me off from decisions, from meetings, and whispered to investors. And I, stupid, tried to be a team player, for the sake of the family, for Dad's sake. And now, my father's 60th birthday. Luxurious banquet at the hotel, Emma's idea. My simple black dress caused her a contemptuous grimace. "Couldn't you have looked more respectable?" I turned away silently. Let her world consist of dresses and toasts. My world is in the logic of the code, where everything is fair. The hall is full. Emma hovers between the tables, airily kissing her partner's cheeks. I'm standing at the column, watching. Then, dinner. The clink of a glass. She gets up for a toast. I'm getting ready to smile, thinking about Dad. But her voice sounds different, metallic, booming. "While we honor Dad," she begins, and the silence hangs like a knife on a thread. It's time to announce changes at Chen Technologies. The board of directors believes that the company needs unified leadership. My mouth is dry. What advice? What meetings? I didn't know anything. We have been held back for too long by outdated thinking. Her gaze, cold and sharp, pierces me. Therefore, I accept the post of sole general director. It's time for some of the elements that are inhibiting growth to go away. My ears are ringing. I see Dad's lips stretch into a proud smile. He doesn't understand. He sees only the triumph of his brilliant daughter. Some people, she continues, the venom of fake regret creeping into her voice, are better at technical tasks. Sarah has done a good job maintaining legacy systems, but moving forward requires vision. Excellence is needed. And let's be honest, Sarah, you're just not cut out for this level of business. I looked at Dad. With all my soul, with all my heart shrinking into an icy ball, I waited for him to get up. He will say, "Enough! This is my daughter." Instead, he nodded at Emma's words, his face beaming with stupid, fatherly pride. He admired her cruel performance as he once admired her school A's. Mom didn't look at me. She stared at her plate, and I saw how small and treacherously her hands were trembling on the tablecloth. She understood everything, and she was silent. "The truth is," Emma's voice cut through the air, rising in volume as if she were speaking to a silent audience, "you are useless in today's business world, Sarah. Your old-fashioned ideas and lack of proper education are simply a burden. Leave with dignity." Silence swallowed everything. The sound of champagne, the clanging of instruments, everything disappeared, leaving only the buzz in my ears and hundreds of glances glued to me. Everything was red in them, burning shame for me, poorly hidden curiosity, disgusting pity. They saw the victim, a carcass being skinned under the light of crystal chandeliers. They took everything from me in front of everyone. Not a company, that would be a matter of paperwork. They took away my history, my 10 years of life, my right to breathe this air, which I filled with meaning. I slowly stood up. The creaking of my chair sounded louder than any of her words. Everyone froze, expecting hysteria, humiliated pleas, women's tears. I didn't give them this spectacle. My legs were weak, but I took a few steps towards the main table. I placed a small, carefully wrapped box in front of my father, an antique pocket watch that he had once shown to me as a child, sighing that he would never be able to afford it. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, so quietly that only he seemed to hear. And she left. She didn't run. She walked through the entire hall, feeling the heat of their gazes on her back, raising her head high, in which absolute, deafening silence raged. I didn't cry that night. I sat in my office at home, in a fortress of code books and folders of patents, each with my name on it. The awards that Emma hung in the office lobby, here with me, were just pieces of iron. I looked at the laptop screen, and inside, instead of pain, a cold, clear flame began to flare up. Emma thought she had won the war by capturing the state palace, but she forgot that the real fortress is not the walls, but the foundation, and that I laid it in such a way that I could pull out the cornerstone at any moment. She enjoyed the moment of triumph, and at 3 a.m, I was already sending letters. Clients, partners, key developers. Every word was measured, icy, and inevitable. My fingers flew across the keyboard, and on my lips, for the first time during this terrible day, a light, silent smile trembled. She thought that business was her glossy courses and ability to make speeches. But real business, it turns out, is quiet nights, thousands of lines of code, and an iron will. Tomorrow will be interesting. The next morning was clear and mercilessly bright. I arrived at the office before everyone else. I was waiting. At 9 o'clock sharp, they entered together, like a king and queen taking over. There were triumphant smiles on their faces, which I will now erase. "Sarah," Emma's voice was a mixture of surprise and irritation. "What are you doing here? I thought you had the dignity not to show yourself." I allowed myself to smile. I'm finishing up my business, sis. Since you're here, let's discuss the future of the company. There's nothing to discuss, Dad said firmly. The decision has been made. Oh, yes, the board of directors. I smoothly ran my finger over the tablet and displayed the document on the huge screen in the intercom. Let me remind you of something. While Emma was playing businesswoman, I was building a company. I own 51% of the shares. Do you remember, Dad, 3 years ago? You had to get to Emma's ceremony urgently, and you signed papers selling me part of your shares without even looking. They turned pale at the same time. Emma dug her nails into the glass of the table. This can't be. This is just the beginning. I opened new tabs. The core of our software, the very thing that brings in 80% of the income, belongs not to Chen Technologies, but to my company, Innovate Solutions. The license expires, I looked at my watch, in 5 minutes. I didn't submit the renewal papers, the ones you didn't have time for last week, Dad. Dad sank heavily into a chair, and a wild, animal understanding flashed in his eyes. Emma's face twisted with rage. You treacherous... Don't rush, I stopped her coldly. While you were making a toast, I was writing to our clients. Most contracts have a clause about my personal responsibility. They work with me, not with you. Do you want to know how many have already canceled their contracts? I opened the mail. Dozens of letters with the subjects, urgent, question regarding the contract, immediate meeting. Confusion was already building behind the glass meeting room. Employees were whispering, showing each other their phone screens. Emma's perfect facade has cracked. She frantically pointed at her phone, her breathing becoming ragged. You can't do this. With the company you wanted to steal, I finished for her. She's already dead, since your toast. I stood up, smoothing out the wrinkles in my skirt. You have 2 options. First, I leave with everything, shares, software, clients, team. And the 2 of you will rake through the empty shell and explain to yesterday's guests how you lost everything overnight. Dad looked devastated. What about the second one? He exhaled. Second, you both resign. I take back full control. You remain minority shareholders with no voting rights. Emma receives a generous severance package and recommendations for a job somewhere, away from here. Emma turned purple. You planned everything. She got us hooked. I laughed, and there was nothing in that sound except bitter cold. No, sister, I was just building a company, and you built a trap for myself. No, Emma, I spent 10 years trying to be a good daughter and a good sister, while you both took me for granted, like air you could live without. I built this company from dust and emptiness, while you collected trophies for my victories. Yes, I planned this. I looked at my watch again. The cold dial was counting down the last seconds of their illusions. About 12 hours ago, the very second you called me useless in front of our entire world. My phone vibrated on the table like an angry hornet. Another notice. Customer, Vertex has activated the termination clause. Sweet music. Time is up. What do you choose? My voice was calm, like the surface of a lake before a storm. The next hour passed in a nightmare kaleidoscope for them. The flickering of the pale faces of the lawyers, the rustling of papers that they signed with trembling hands, Emma's suppressed whisper, "This is blackmail." By noon, it was all over. I was left alone in my office. No, now it was exclusively my office, looking at the city spread out below me. The kingdom that I won back. But the air here smelled not of triumph, but of ash, a victory that made me sick. Around me, not just a working relationship, but an entire life lay in ruins. Fragments of trust, fragments of a common past, trampled photographs in frames. The crystal of our once common future has been shattered. Mom came to see me that evening. She knocked so quietly, as if she was afraid to wake up the pain. Her eyes, usually so warm, were puffy and red. "Did it have to end like this, Sharochka?" she asked, and all the sorrow of the world sounded in her voice. "They left me no choice, Mom," I answered, and my voice, although soft, was hard as granite. They would tear out everything I had created and throw me out the door without a second look. I just closed the door earlier. She nodded slowly, understanding with her mind, but not accepting with her heart. What will happen now? I turned the laptop screen towards her, showing her diagrams, graphs, drawings of the new one, a vision that had been smoldering within me for years, but which was suffocated by their doubts and her arrogance. Now I will build something bigger. This time, I won't have to carry those who consider me a burden on my back. A year later, Chen Technologies tripled its value under my sole authority. Emma, resigned but not repentant, drove off to Silicon Valley to work at someone else's startup, where her brilliant manners had no weight without other people's ideas. Dad retired, finally realizing that his golden girl had almost thrown everything that he had once started into the wind. We see each other at Christmas. We drink tea. We maintain a polite, ice-fragile distance that hides wounds that may never heal. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I look at old photographs. Emma and I, little, in the same dresses, and I feel a needle-sharp longing for what we have lost forever. But then my memory takes me back to that banquet hall, icy contempt in her eyes, and the way Dad nodded, approving of her every poisonous word. In business, as in family, respect must be earned. They learned this lesson too late. But I learned another truth. The quiet ones, the useless dreamers, are the ones to be feared the most, because we are the ones who know how to build entire worlds from nothing, and we know how to take them back when the thieves come. My story has become a legend in business circles. I am introduced in a whisper at conferences. This is Sarah Chin, the one that... They don't finish the sentence. And don't. My new skyscraper in the city center speaks louder than any gossip. Last week, a letter arrived. Invitation to speak to graduates of Emma's business school. Topic: Hidden Powers, the power of underrated leaders. The irony of fate was so thick that it could be cut with a knife. I accepted the invitation. I have a story for them. The company is thriving, but something else is more important. Peace has finally come within me. I proved my truth not in order to trample them, but in order to free myself. The sweetest revenge is not to destroy the enemy, but to rise so high that their mistakes are visible to themselves, as if from a bird's eye view. As I write these lines, looking at the city lights from my office window, I remember my mother's words. Success is the best revenge, but wisdom is knowing when to stop seeking revenge and just start growing. She was right. I have outgrown both them and my pain. On the shelf behind me, there is still that same undelivered gift to Dad, an album with the history of our workshop. Frame by frame, from the first soldering iron to the first complex cloud service architecture. Maybe someday, if the scars fade into ghostly lines, I'll give it to him. In the meantime, it serves as a reminder. Our greatest strengths often grow out of the very things others despise about us. And calm water, it turns out, can wash away entire banks.